So it sounds like between your grandfather, your dad, and you, and possibly Chris, there's some friendly competition that might have even spurred the success of your business. How did you handle that?
Well, that's a very true statement. And I wouldn't say much as friendly. I would say it was very vicious at times. We used to challenge each other quite a bit in our own way. And I would say, as far as handling it, you're driven from within, and you want to succeed. And the funny side of this, and I hope I don't sound too corny with it, is when I was doing it, I didn't do it for the money. I did it for the competition to show how I could do it and what I could build and how successful we could be. And that seemed to have followed how successful I became. But my son Chris shares that same sentiment. It's how good he can be at what he's doing. His name is his bond. He believes that if he gives someone his word, he's going to do something that's better than any contract you're going to sign.
So a question I often get from families is, how should they be raising their children? So obviously it's in your blood, but there has to be some way that you're raising your children, and you were raised to have that drive and determination and that hard work ethic. Like, what was it? What advice would you give for other family businesses in raising their children?
That's a very difficult question. I can speak to that as to what I did. My father was very driven. He wasn't home that much in the beginning to get the business started. So I didn't really get to know my father that well until I actually started working here, believe it or not. When I got married and started raising my own family, I was dedicated to them. I made sure that I didn't miss a football game or a basketball game or an a cappella or anything that they were involved in. I wanted to make sure I participated in it and heard it. But then again, I got married a little later in life at 32. And I had my wife, Betty Brito, she was an educator in high school. And she really stayed on top of them as far as their bookwork. But as far as the entity, the family core, we were very tight, and we still are. But the most important thing out of that is you've got to be able to compartmentalize business and family. You've got to know when to shut off the switch of being at work and turn on the switch of being at home. Because I think if you try to drag one into the other, you lose part of the realization of what your family actually is. That would be my suggestion. That's what's worked for us. So to be sitting here today and having my son, the fourth generation, be the vice president, working from the bottom up, I think it worked pretty well. And for the parent that's actually running the business or owning the business, don't be afraid to wrap your arms around them and give them a kiss on the cheek every now and then, as well as a kick in the butt if they need it. But you've got to be able to let them know they're doing well, and you don't over-exacerbate that, but you want them to know that they're succeeding on the levels that you think they should. That's very important.
So how did you make sure that C.B. Brito didn't become a birthright? They didn't feel entitled to it.
Well, it started when I worked here with my father and grandfather. If I didn't work as hard as the laborers out in the field side by side with them, I wouldn't be there. And so I took on the role of I had to outperform them, or I had to outwork them, or I had to make them, I wanted them to accept me, and to accept me, I had to make sure I performed to standards and as best as I could, which worked out well. There is no birthright. Anyone who runs a business thinking there's a birthright and to bring their child in the upper echelon and not from the bottom working up actually sets themselves up for failure, because there's too much of the I want, I need. You won't see us driving Ferraris around here. You won't see us not keeping track of our common man, of what's important to us and those who work here. But when you start at the top, you don't appreciate what you have and the way you've built it as much as when you start from the bottom coming up.
How did you manage the reporting relationship? So does your son, when he was starting his way from the bottom up, did he work directly for you, or did you have him work for others?
Actually, when he was, after he was working here for a while and he graduated from college, my wife and I decided to give him a couple of weeks off and let him have some fun. So he sat down with me 3 days before the second week was up and said, "So when do I start work?" I said, "What do you mean, when do you start work?" He said, "When do I start work?" I said, "Did you apply for a position?" He said, "Dad, I've worked there all my summers and whatever." I said, "Right." son, things have changed. You got to apply for a position now. So he did, and he had an interview, and the fellows who hired him worked for me for a long time, and he worked directly for them and not directly for me. And I wanted to keep that arm length relationship intentionally because I didn't want to have to be the guy saying, you can't do that. And it worked out very well. Some families like to have their children work for another company and learn the way they do things or whatever. But culturally, I guess that's good if that's what your intent is. I find by having them ingrained by the individuals who built this company, the superintendents, the foremen, the laborers, more importantly than anybody else, because they're the ones that are really working the hardest, that they have a whole different perspective and respect for what they're doing.
How did you make sure they weren't easy on him?
Well, knowing the fellas in the field and how hard they work, they made sure he pulled his weight just as much as they did. But Chris came into this with an attitude of, like I did, I can do this and I can do it better. And he's really worked hard at it. And he's very intelligent. And, you know, we handle our construction claims internally until we need legal advice. We write them ourselves and whatever. And I was very good at that. And I have to tell you, my son is even better.
Oh,
I've told him that. So.
And you've told him that.
Oh, guaranteed.
Really important.
Yes.
What advice do you have for parents and even the children making that transition so you're seen as an employee and someone who wants to contribute to the business and not having that, father-son relationship at work?
Well, you can have a father-son relationship as long as you have guidelines. Chris got 1 week vacation when he started until after several years, then he got his second week. He was treated like everyone else. Wants a day off, it has to come out of his vacation time unless there's a health issue or whatever. But you don't deviate from the way you run your company and your core value of your company. You have them embrace it and be part of it. But when you try to separate that you're going to treat them differently, then don't expect the rest of your employees to respect them as much as they respected you because they're not being treated equally. Everyone has to be on the same line.
What are your final words of wisdom for family businesses who want to make it to the fourth generation and maybe even eventually make it to the fifth generation?
One of the things I've done is I used to be here for 60, 70 hours a week. I don't do that anymore. Since I made Chris vice president, if I'm here, they're going to come to me with their problems and ask me for guidance. By having Chris as the vice president, he has to solve those problems, and it's his guidance. So I've stepped back quite a bit. I take Mondays and Fridays off. I'm here Tuesday through Thursday, not even maybe sometimes a full day, sometimes not. But Chris has me on speed dial. He's wise enough that if he needs some guidance or some answers to something he doesn't have, he'll call me. But if I'm here 5 days a week for 40, 50 hours a week, and I'm still maintaining the level of work ethic that I had, I'll be still running the business. And that's not what I want to do. I want Chris to make mistakes. I want him to learn from his mistakes. I want him to thrive and go forward. And the only way to do that is to let him make the decisions and let him run the company. It's real easy. Trust, respect, and reporting. Trust, respect, and reporting. I respect the decisions Chris makes. He's going to make a mistake. We all did. But you learn from that mistake and it makes you stronger. That's very true, by the way. As far as reporting, Chris keeps me involved of the senior things that are going on that I really need to know about. So I won't have any surprises on the street or read about it in the press or whatever. So he knows how to keep me up to date with what's going on. But the most important thing is I've got to be able to let him be his own person. And if I don't do that, this company's not going to succeed through a fourth generation. The land that we have here will become a parking lot. I don't want to do that. So when you select someone to run your company, regardless if it's family or not family, you've got to be able to let them run it their way and culturally the way they think. Chris has already done more things than I would have done here. If you're sincere about bringing your next generation in and you really want to see that individual succeed, family or not, you've got to be able to take a step back and let them run their own culture.
Excellent. So I want to thank you again for being with us. I'm Kimberly Eddleston with familybusiness.org and also EIX. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be here today with Mr. Joseph Brito, Jr., President of CB Utility. Thank you very much.